Professor Kethval stood at the front of her classroom, her crystalline body shimmering with nervous energy. Today was different from any other day in her 300 years of teaching at the Galactic Academy. Today, she would introduce the first human student ever to attend their prestigious institution. The morning light from Zentari Prime's twin suns cast colorful patterns through the translucent walls of the lecture hall. Students from 12 different species had gathered for advanced xenobiology, but their usual chatter was replaced by anxious whispers. Everyone knew what was coming. "Settle down, class," Professor Kethval said, her voice carrying the musical tones typical of her people. The translation devices around each student's desk hummed softly as her words converted into their native languages. In the front row, Zarathi's crystal form flickered between blue and purple, showing her excitement and fear. The young Quellian had read every available report about humans and their terrifying homeworld called Earth. Behind her, 3 Sylvani students rustled their leaf-like appendages, releasing the sweet scent they produced when nervous. Their tree-like bodies swayed slightly despite the absence of any wind. Near the back of the room, Velnox adjusted his containment suit for the 5th time that morning. As a gaseous being, he needed the protective gear to maintain his form in the oxygen-rich atmosphere that most solid species preferred. The Nether had heard rumors that humans actually breathed oxygen naturally, which seemed impossible to believe. "Before we begin today's lesson on adaptive evolution," Professor Kethval continued, "I have an important announcement. As part of the Cultural Exchange Initiative, we will be hosting a student from the Sol system." A collective intake of breath echoed through the room. Some students had hoped the rumors were just gossip spreading through the Academy's communication networks. Now, I want everyone to remember that despite the classifications of their homeworld, our new student is here to learn, just like all of you. Please treat them with the same respect you would show any other classmate. The door to the lecture hall slid open with a soft hiss. Every head turned to watch as a figure walked through the entrance. The human was smaller than the holovids had suggested, standing only about average height compared to most species in the room. He had short brown hair, pale skin, and wore simple clothing that looked remarkably normal. "Class, please welcome James Thompson from Sol 3, Professor Kethval announced. James walked into the room with a relaxed stride, completely unaware of the tension his presence created. He smiled broadly, showing his teeth in what the aliens had learned was a friendly human gesture, though it still made several students flinch. Those teeth looked remarkably sharp for a supposedly peaceful species. "Hey everyone," James said, his voice warm and casual. "Great to be here. I'm really looking forward to learning with all of you." He moved to an empty desk in the middle of the room, setting down a small backpack and what appeared to be some kind of personal belongings. Among these items was a sleek black container that immediately caught the attention of several students. It was cylindrical, with a tight-fitting lid, and seemed to be designed to keep something either very hot or very cold. As James settled into his seat, a rich aroma began to fill the air around him. The scent was complex, bitter, and earthy, with hints of something that made it strangely appealing despite being completely alien to every nose in the room. Several students found themselves leaning forward slightly, trying to identify the mysterious smell. Zarathi's crystal body chimed softly as she processed the new information. The human seemed friendly enough, but she had read the reports about Earth. The planet was classified as a Class 12 death world, with gravity that could crush most civilized beings, an atmosphere containing the highly reactive gas oxygen, and weather patterns that included frozen precipitation and electrical storms. How could any being survive in such conditions, let alone seem so calm about it? "I know this is probably weird for everyone," James continued, seemingly oblivious to the stares he was receiving. "I mean, I'm probably the first human most of you have ever seen in person. Feel free to ask me questions anytime. I promise I don't bite." The comment about biting made 3 students in the back row exchange worried glances. Did that mean biting was something humans normally did? Professor Kethval cleared her throat, her crystal form shifting to a more professional pale green color. "Thank you, James. We're pleased to have you join us. Now, shall we begin today's lesson?" As she moved toward her teaching podium, the mysterious aroma from James's belongings grew stronger. Whatever was in that black container was definitely organic, and it was producing chemical compounds that registered on several species' enhanced olfactory systems. The Sylvani students had closed their breathing pores, while the Nethers had sealed their suits completely. James, however, seemed completely comfortable, even happy. He pulled out what appeared to be a data pad and a writing instrument, preparing to take notes like any other student. His easy manner and obvious intelligence made it hard to reconcile him with the terrifying stories about Deathworld survivors. Today we'll be studying how different species have adapted to extreme environments, Professor Kethval began, stealing a glance at James. We'll examine how evolution shapes beings to not only survive but thrive in conditions that would be lethal to other forms of life. The irony of the lesson was not lost on anyone in the room, especially as that strange, intoxicating scent continued to drift from the human's mysterious container. At exactly 8 o'clock, just as Professor Kethval was preparing to begin her lecture on cellular adaptation, James performed an action that would haunt the dreams of his classmates for weeks to come. He reached into his bag and pulled out the mysterious black container that had been the subject of whispered speculation since his arrival. The rich, bitter aroma that had puzzled everyone suddenly intensified as James twisted the lid open with a soft click. Steam rose from the opening, carrying with it a scent so powerful that Velnox immediately sealed his containment suit and activated his emergency air filters. The 3 Silvani students in the front row quickly closed their breathing pores and began filtering air through their secondary respiratory systems. James seemed completely unaware of the growing alarm around him. He reached into his bag again and produced a small white cup, no bigger than his palm. With practiced ease, he tilted the black container and began pouring a dark liquid into the cup. The liquid was almost black, with a rich brown color that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The steam rising from the cup carried the mysterious scent throughout the entire lecture hall. Students began shifting uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether they were witnessing some kind of human religious ceremony or a dangerous chemical process. "What is he doing?" whispered Zarathi to her neighbor, her crystal body flickering between worried purple and frightened yellow colors. James lifted the small cup to his lips and took a long, satisfied sip of the dark liquid. His entire demeanor changed instantly. His shoulders relaxed, his eyes brightened, and a genuine smile spread across his face. He let out a soft sigh of contentment that somehow made the entire situation even more disturbing to his observers. "Ah, perfect," James said to himself, taking another sip. "I really needed that." Professor Kethval had stopped her lesson preparation entirely and was now staring at her human student with a mixture of fascination and horror. Her crystalline form had shifted to a pale, worried blue color. In her 3 centuries of teaching, she had never seen a student voluntarily consume an unknown substance during class. "James," she said carefully, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent room. "What exactly are you drinking?" James looked up with surprise, as if he had forgotten he was not alone. "Oh, this? It's just coffee. I hope that's okay. I know I should have asked permission first." The word coffee meant nothing to any of the translation devices in the room. They simply repeated the sound without providing any context or meaning, making it sound even more ominous and alien. "Coffee." Professor Kethval repeated, her scientific curiosity overcoming her caution. "Could you describe what this substance is?" James took another sip before answering, apparently using the liquid to help him think. "Well, it's made from ground beans that grow on Earth. You brew them in hot water to extract the flavor and caffeine. It's a mild stimulant that helps you wake up and stay alert." Several students exchanged worried looks. A stimulant? The human was voluntarily consuming a mind-altering chemical? And he called it mild? "I usually drink about 6 cups a day," James continued casually, "but I'm trying to cut back to 4 or 5. My doctor says too much caffeine isn't good for you." The implication that James consumed this mysterious substance multiple times per day sent a wave of concern through the classroom. Zarathi's crystal form was now pulsing rapidly between different shades of purple, indicating extreme agitation. "Caffeine?" Professor Kethval asked, though she was already quietly activating her personal scanner to analyze whatever this human was consuming. "Yeah, it's a natural compound found in coffee beans, tea leaves, chocolate, that kind of thing. Pretty common stuff on Earth. Most humans drink coffee or tea in the morning to help wake up." While James spoke, Professor Kethval's scanner was providing her with information that made her crystal structure dim with shock. The liquid in James's cup contained massive amounts of a chemical compound that her database identified as extremely toxic to most known life forms. The concentration was high enough to cause immediate cardiac arrest in Quellians, complete system failure in Nethys, and cellular breakdown in Silvani. The human was casually consuming what amounted to poison, and he was describing it as a normal morning routine. "Is this substance, does it cause you any discomfort?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. James laughed, a sound that made several students jump slightly. "Discomfort? No way. It makes me feel great. I can't really function properly without my morning coffee. It's like fuel for the human brain." He took another long sip to demonstrate his point, and his obvious enjoyment of the toxic liquid made the situation even more surreal. Professor Kethval saved the scanner data to her personal files, knowing that this information would be invaluable for xenobiological research. Here was proof that humans could not only survive on their death world, but they had evolved to require substances that would kill most other intelligent species. As James continued drinking his coffee and preparing for the day's lesson, completely unaware of the shock he had caused, Professor Kethval made a mental note to warn the Academy's medical staff about what their human student considered a normal breakfast beverage. The morning ritual was complete, but the real education was just beginning. Students from other classes began gathering outside the xenobiology lecture hall 30 minutes before each session, hoping to catch a glimpse of the human performing his daily ritual. The corridors buzzed with theories and speculation that grew more dramatic with each retelling. "I heard he drinks pure rocket fuel," whispered Marixtel, a third-year engineering student who had never even seen James in person. "No, that's not right," corrected his study partner, a young Quellian named Blixthor. "My cousin's friend was in that class. She said it's some kind of liquid metal that burns through organic tissue." "Both of you are wrong," interrupted Senekai, a graduate student in chemistry. "I ran the calculations based on the descriptions. The concentration of toxins would liquefy our internal organs in seconds." The rumors grew more outlandish by the hour. Some students claimed James was actually a military experiment gone wrong. Others believed humans were a warrior species that required combat stimulants to remain functional. A few even suggested that Earth wasn't really a planet at all, but some kind of weapons testing facility. Professor Kethval tried to maintain normal classroom activities, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. Her students were distracted, constantly glancing at James during his morning coffee routine with a mixture of fascination and terror that made productive learning nearly impossible. James, meanwhile, remained completely oblivious to his growing reputation as the Academy's most dangerous student. He continued his daily routine exactly as he had for the past week, arriving each morning with his black thermal container and enjoying what he considered a perfectly normal cup of coffee. "Good morning, everyone," he would say cheerfully, settling into his usual seat and beginning his brewing ritual. The familiar aroma would fill the room, causing the same pattern of defensive reactions from his classmates, but James never seemed to notice their behavior as anything unusual. On Monday of the second week, the situation reached a new level of intensity when Dr. Horthgan, the Academy's chief medical officer, requested permission to observe one of James's coffee sessions. The distinguished Nether physician arrived wearing full protective gear and carrying advanced scanning equipment that was normally reserved for handling hazardous materials. "This is purely for research purposes," Dr. Horthgan assured Professor Kethval as he set up his instruments. "The medical community is very interested in understanding how Deathworld species process toxins." James arrived at his usual time, greeting everyone with his typical friendly smile. "Morning, folks. Oh, new faces today. Are we having some kind of special lesson?" "Dr. Horthgan is here to observe interspecies biology," Professor Kethval explained carefully, not wanting to alarm James with the truth about why half the medical faculty was now watching him through the classroom's observation windows. "Cool," James said, pulling out his coffee supplies. "Always happy to help with science." As James began his morning routine, Dr. Horthgan's instruments immediately started recording data. The readings that appeared on his displays caused several observers to step backward involuntarily. The chemical analysis confirmed everyone's worst fears and added new ones they had not previously considered. "Remarkable," Dr. Horthgan muttered, reviewing the data streaming across his screens. "The toxicity levels are even higher than our initial estimates suggested." James took his first sip and smiled with satisfaction. "This is a really good batch. I got it from a coffee shop near the spaceport before I left Earth. They roast their own beans." The casual mention of roasting made several students assume that James was describing some kind of thermal treatment designed to increase the potency of his deadly beverage. The reality that humans actually preferred their coffee prepared this way seemed too bizarre to believe. "James," Dr. Horthgan said carefully, "how long have you been consuming this substance?" "Coffee? Oh, since I was probably 15 or 16. My parents wouldn't let me drink it before then. They said it would stunt my growth." James chuckled at the memory. Most humans start drinking coffee sometime during their teenage years. The revelation that humans began consuming this toxic substance while they were still developing sent a wave of horror through the assembled observers. Dr. Horthgan made urgent notes about the implications of exposing young Deathworlders to such dangerous chemicals during their formative years. "And you mentioned yesterday that you consume multiple portions of this daily," the doctor continued. "Yeah, usually 4 to 6 cups," depending on how tired I am or how much work I have to do. Sometimes more if I'm pulling an all-nighter for exams. James took another sip. I know I probably drink too much coffee, but it's hard to cut back. The stuff is just so good, and it really helps me focus. The idea that James might consume even larger quantities of his toxic fuel when under stress painted a picture of human biology that challenged everything the galactic medical community thought they understood about life forms and survival limits. By the end of the observation session, Dr. Horthgan had enough data to write a dozen research papers. More importantly, he had confirmed that humans were even more remarkable and terrifying than anyone had previously imagined. James finished his coffee, packed up his supplies, and prepared for the day's lesson with his usual cheerful energy, completely unaware that he had just redefined the galaxy's understanding of what was biologically possible. The alien students, who had grown accustomed to studying their human classmates' daily routines with scientific fascination, immediately noticed the change. James moved slowly to his desk, each step seeming to require more effort than normal. When he sat down, he slumped forward and rubbed his temples with both hands. Supply transport got delayed at the jump gate, James mumbled to no one in particular, holding up his empty coffee container. The familiar black thermal device that had become the source of both terror and curiosity among his classmates was completely empty. Won't be here for another 3 or 4 days. Zarathi's crystal body immediately shifted to a concerned yellow color. In the 2 weeks since James had arrived, she had never seen him without his morning ritual of consuming the toxic liquid he called coffee. Her crystalline structure chimed softly as she processed this new information. By the time Professor Kethval began her lecture on adaptive metabolism, it was clear that something was seriously wrong with their human student. James sat staring at his empty container with what could only be described as longing, occasionally lifting it to his nose as if hoping to catch some remaining trace of the mysterious aroma. "James, are you feeling well?" Professor Kethval asked, her crystal form flickering with worry. "Just a little headache," James replied, though he continued rubbing his temples. "Nothing serious. I just really need my coffee." The word "need" sent a chill through the classroom. The students had observed James drinking his coffee with obvious pleasure, but they had assumed it was simply a recreational activity. The possibility that he actually required the toxic substance to function normally was far more terrifying than anyone had imagined. As the morning progressed, James's condition appeared to worsen. His usual quick responses to questions became slow and thoughtful. He seemed to have trouble concentrating on the lesson, and twice Professor Kethval had to repeat questions before he understood what she was asking. "I'm sorry," James said after failing to answer a simple question about cellular adaptation. "My brain feels like it's full of cotton. I really can't think straight without caffeine." Velnox, the gaseous nether student, sent an emergency message to his podmates through his suit's communication system. The human was describing symptoms that sounded like the early stages of toxic withdrawal. If James truly required regular doses of the deadly chemical to maintain normal brain function, then his current condition suggested he was slowly dying. By midday, the situation had become critical from the alien's perspective. James described his headache as splitting, though he continued to insist it was not serious. To his classmates, however, it appeared their Deathworld friend was experiencing severe neurological distress from the lack of his essential toxins. "We have to help him," declared Melandra, a empathetic Sylvani whose leaf-like appendages rustled with determination. "Perhaps we can find a substitute for his fuel source." The students rallied together with touching concern for their suffering classmate. Zarathi offered mineral water from her homeworld, rich in crystals that provided energy to her people. Velnox shared a portion of his nutrient gas, normally reserved for emergency situations. The Sylvani students pooled their resources to offer photosynthetic enhancer, a liquid that boosted their natural energy production. James accepted each offering with genuine gratitude, though his attempts to consume the alien beverages met with limited success. The mineral water tasted like liquid metal to his human palate. The nutrient gas made him cough and his eyes water. The photosynthetic enhancer, while sweet, had no effect on his growing fatigue. "I really appreciate this, guys," James said, his voice weaker than usual. "You're being incredibly kind. But I don't think any of this is going to work. I specifically need coffee. The caffeine withdrawal is pretty rough, but nothing else really helps." The phrase caffeine withdrawal confirmed the aliens' worst fears. Their human friend was not simply uncomfortable, he was experiencing the biological consequences of toxin deprivation. His body had become so adapted to regular doses of the deadly chemical that he could not function without it. Professor Kethval discreetly contacted the Academy's medical facility and requested consultation with Dr. Horthgan. The chief medical officer arrived within an hour, bringing with him a team of specialists and emergency medical equipment. How long can humans survive without their essential toxins? Dr. Horthgan asked quietly, scanning James with instruments designed to detect organ failure. I don't know, Professor Kethval replied. He says the supply transport will arrive in 3 days, but his condition is deteriorating rapidly. By the second day, James was describing his symptoms as a really bad headache and feeling completely wiped out. To the medical team monitoring him, these descriptions suggested advanced system failure. His alien classmates maintained a vigil, taking turns offering support and bringing various remedies from their homeworlds. You guys don't need to worry about me, James told them weakly. It's just caffeine withdrawal. Humans go through this sometimes when we try to quit coffee. I'll be fine once I get some real coffee back in my system. The medical team prepared for the worst while James's classmates watched in horror as their Deathworld friend slowly succumbed to the lack of his vital toxins. The situation had become a crisis that would test everything they thought they knew about human biology and survival. I've never seen a medical emergency over coffee before, the courier remarked to Dr. Horthgan as he handed over a sealed container. Are you sure this is what you need? We believe this substance is essential for human survival, Dr. Horthgan replied seriously, treating the package like it contained life-saving medicine. Word spread quickly through the academy that James's vital supplies had arrived. Students from 12 different species gathered outside the xenobiology classroom, creating the largest audience Professor Kethval had ever seen for a morning lecture. Even faculty members from other departments found excuses to be present, claiming they were conducting research on Deathworld biology. James arrived looking worse than he had the previous day. His skin appeared pale, his movements were slow and careful, and the dark circles under his eyes made him look like he had not slept in days. He carried his empty coffee container with the desperate hope of someone who had been separated from something precious. The supply ship finally made it, James announced weakly to his worried classmates. I should be back to normal soon. Dr. Horthgan and his medical team had positioned monitoring equipment throughout the room, preparing to document what they expected would be either a miraculous recovery or a catastrophic reaction to the human consuming his toxic fuel after several days of deprivation. James opened the package from the supply transport and pulled out several bags of dark brown granules. The familiar rich aroma immediately filled the classroom, causing the usual defensive reactions from the alien students. But this time, their responses were mixed with anticipation rather than simple fear. Oh, this smells so good, James said, breathing in the scent deeply. For the first time in 3 days, he smiled with genuine happiness. Real coffee from Earth. I miss this so much. He prepared his coffee with unusual care, measuring the grounds precisely and waiting patiently for the water to reach the correct temperature. His alien classmates watched every movement with intense fascination, as if they were observing a complex medical procedure rather than a simple morning beverage routine. When James finally took his first sip of coffee in 4 days, the change was immediate and startling. Color returned to his pale face almost instantly. His posture straightened, his shoulders relaxed, and his eyes regained their normal brightness. The transformation was so dramatic that several students gasped audibly. Oh wow, James said after taking a long, satisfying drink. I feel so much better. That was rough. I never want to go through caffeine withdrawal again. Dr. Horthgan's monitoring equipment registered rapid changes in James's biological readings. His heart rate stabilized, his brain activity increased to normal levels, and various stress indicators dropped significantly. The toxic substance that would kill most known life forms was actually restoring the human to perfect health. This is incredible, Dr. Horthgan whispered to Professor Kethval. His entire system is responding to the toxin like it's essential medicine. James took another sip and sighed with contentment. Thanks for putting up with me the last few days, everyone. I get pretty useless without my coffee. I probably should have warned you about that when I first arrived. The classroom remained silent as the full implications of what they had witnessed began to sink in. This friendly human student did not simply enjoy consuming a substance that would be instantly lethal to them. He actually required regular doses of it to maintain normal biological function. Without his daily coffee, James had experienced genuine physical distress that affected his ability to think and move normally. James, Professor Kethval said carefully, would you be willing to give a presentation about human dietary requirements? The scientific community would be very interested in learning more about your species' nutritional needs. Sure, I'd be happy to, James replied enthusiastically, his normal energy completely restored. I could talk about coffee, tea, energy drinks, alcohol, spicy food, chocolate. We have lots of interesting stuff on Earth. The mention of additional substances that humans consumed recreationally caused half the students in the room to immediately faint. Alcohol was a known industrial solvent. Energy drinks suggested even more concentrated toxins than coffee. Spicy food implied humans regularly consumed caustic chemicals for pleasure. The other half of the class, however, signed up immediately for James's presentation, though they made sure to request protective equipment and medical supervision for the event. As the days passed, James became something of a legend throughout the Galactic Academy. Students would point him out in the hallways as the human who runs on rocket fuel. Faculty members requested permission to observe his daily coffee routine for research purposes. The Academy's food service department created a special storage area for human nutritional supplies, complete with hazardous material warnings. But more importantly, the coffee incident fundamentally changed how everyone at the Academy viewed both James and humanity as a whole. They no longer saw humans as terrifying monsters from a death world. Instead, they recognized them as remarkably resilient beings who had adapted to survive in conditions that would destroy other life forms. James continued his studies, completely unaware that he had become the most respected and feared student in the Academy's history. He simply enjoyed his daily coffee and wondered why everyone seemed so impressed by perfectly normal human behavior. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again.